The dust felt like a second skin, clinging to my arms and legs, a constant companion under the relentless sun. My name is Tariq. The world I know is a vast open land of tall grasses that scratch at my knees and thorny trees that offer little shade. The years, we do not count them by the turn of seasons, but by the hunger that gnaws at our bellies and the moons that have passed since we last found a great water hole. I am a boy of perhaps 10 years, but in this world age is measured not in moons, but in the strength of your hands and the sharpness of your mind. We are the clan of the Great Ridge, and our survival is a daily battle. Our lives are defined by what we can find. We are not the strongest of the two-legged creatures, nor are we the fastest. We have no great fangs or claws to hunt the swift antelope that dart across the plains. Instead, our strength lies in our hands and the things we can do with them. Today, we had a rare stroke of luck. We had found a kill left behind by a great cat, a wildebeest, its body still warm, its thick hide a challenge to open. The big cats, the ones with the teeth like great knives, had eaten their fill and moved on, leaving us with a chance. But a chance is not a certainty. Our clan leader, a wise old male named Goro, with a face as weathered as the stones we used, led us to the carcass. He held a rock in his hand, a simple, heavy stone, but to us, it was a weapon. With a series of powerful practiced blows, he broke the thick bone of the wildebeest's leg. The sound was a loud, satisfying crack that echoed across the plains. The rest of us gathered around, our mouths watering with a hunger that was almost unbearable. My mother, Alara, held a sharp flake of rock, one she had been working on for many moons. It was a tool, a new kind of tool. She used it to cut away the sinews and hide, her movements precise and quick. This was our way. This was how we survived. We did not hunt with our bodies. We hunted with our minds, with our hands, and with the tools we created. While the adults worked, I was on lookout with the other children. Our job was to watch, to listen, to be the eyes of the clan. The savannah is a beautiful but terrible place. A movement in the tall grass could mean a jackal trying to steal a scrap, or it could mean the return of the great cat, its eyes burning with a possessive fury. My friend, a girl named Lena, was a master of observation. She could spot a lone vulture circling miles away, a sign of a new kill or a sign of a dying animal. We watched the horizon, our small bodies tense with a constant readiness. But today the air was different. The wind carried a dry, hot scent, a scent that spoke of an endless season without rain. The river, the great lifeblood of our land, had not run full for many moons. The water holes we relied on were now little more than muddy puddles, and soon they too would disappear. We were no longer a clan that was simply surviving. We were a clan that was facing a challenge we had never known. The animals, our primary source of food, were moving, driven by the same thirst that was driving us. We had to move as well. The evening sun cast long, dancing shadows as we gathered the meager remains of our meal. Goro, his face grim with the weight of his decision, called us together. He pointed to the east, toward the great jagged mountains that rose into the sky, their peaks shrouded in a perpetual haze. He spoke of a place he had only heard about in the stories of the elders, a place with a great lake that never ran dry, a place where the trees were laden with fruit and the animals were plentiful. It was a place of hope, a land of promise, but it was a long journey, and the land between here and there was a barren, unforgiving wasteland. A new kind of fear, not the cold fear of a sudden attack, but a deep, unsettling dread of the unknown, began to settle over our clan. The other mothers, their faces etched with worry, held their children close. The journey would be long, the path would be perilous. We were leaving the only home we had ever known, a land we had learned to read, a land whose every danger we understood. Now we were stepping into the vast unknown world, a world where our tools and our cunning might not be enough. As the first star appeared in the darkening sky, we began to move, a small, fragile line of beings walking into the great unknown, our survival resting not on brute strength, but on the hope that our hands and our minds would be enough to carry us to a new home. The dust we kicked up felt like a cloud of memories, the last of our old home. We walked with a slow, steady rhythm, our feet following Goro, who moved with the quiet certainty of a great river. The sun rose, a merciless eye in the sky, and beat down on us without pause. The land was a monotonous canvas of dry, cracked earth and skeletal acacia trees. There were no animals here, no signs of life, only the ghosts of what had once been. The hunger that had been a dull ache in our bellies was now a sharp, demanding pain. The children were quieter than ever, their small hands clinging to their mothers, their faces pale with exhaustion. My mother, Ilara, held my hand tightly, her grip a constant, warm reassurance. She was not a big woman, but her strength was in her will. She had a certain kind of focus, a way of looking at the world that saw not just what was, but what could be. She was carrying a heavy bundle of tubers she had dug up before we left, their promise of a meal a heavy weight on her back. Goro, our leader, was at the front, his head held high, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of a green patch, a cluster of trees, a hint of water. His silence was a kind of strength, a reassurance that he knew the way, even if we did not. The journey was a lesson in endurance. We walked for what felt like an eternity, our world shrinking to the rhythm of our steps and the desperate search for shade. The sun was a hammer, and the earth was an anvil. We were caught in the middle. We had to stop often, to rest, to let the children gather their strength. But with every stop, the fear grew. The fear of being left behind, of being a meal for a passing predator, a final meal in a forgotten land. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, we came across a sight that made us all stop. It was a watering hole, but not one of the muddy puddles we were used to. It was a deep, black-bottomed pit, a pool of water that was still and dark, a mirror to the sky. It was a lifeline in this parched land. A collective sigh of relief swept through the clan, and the children began to run toward it, their feet, which had been so heavy, now light and quick. But Goro stopped them. He held up his hand, a silent command that was more powerful than any words. He moved slowly, his eyes sweeping the area around the watering hole. The silence that fell over us was a heavy, suffocating blanket. The water was there, but so was something else. A scent that spoke of danger, a scent that was both a promise and a threat. It was the scent of a predator, the musky, wild smell of a leopard. We had found a lifeline, but we had also found a trap. The children, who had been so eager to drink, now stood still, their small bodies trembling with a new kind of fear. My mother, Ilara, pulled me back, her body a shield between me and the watering hole. Goro looked at the water, then at the sky. He looked at us, his face a mask of grim determination. He pointed to a high rock outcropping, a small fortress of stone that overlooked the watering hole. He gestured for us to climb, to get off the ground. We would wait. We would wait for the predator to show itself or for the darkness to hide us. The climb up the rocks was a frantic, desperate scramble. Our hands and feet, which had been so clumsy on the plains, were now nimble and strong. We climbed and we climbed, our bodies pulling themselves higher and higher, away from the danger below. From the top of the rocks we had a good view of the watering hole. The moon, a crescent of bone, had now appeared in the sky, casting a pale, ethereal light on the scene. The water looked beautiful and dangerous, a black mirror in a world of dust. As we watched, we saw it. a blur of spots, a shadow that moved. With a liquid grace emerged from the bushes. It was a leopard, its eyes, a terrible, piercing gold, fixed on the watering hole. It was not alone. Behind it, another leopard emerged, and then another, a family. They had been waiting for us, for the thirsty, tired creatures who would be too desperate to be cautious. We had found water, but we had also found death. We were trapped on our rocky perch, safe for now, but unable to reach the very thing that would keep us alive. The long night of fear and thirst had just begun. The air on our rocky perch grew cold and thin. The moon, a crescent of bone, now seemed to mock us, its pale light illuminating the very thing that kept us trapped. Below, the three leopards moved with a silent, terrible grace. They were not at the watering hole for a drink. They were there for us. They were patient hunters, knowing that our thirst would eventually drive us down from our safe haven. My mother, Alara, held me close. Her hands, which had been so strong and nimble, were now trembling slightly. I could feel the rapid, frantic beat of her heart against my back. The other mothers, huddled together with their children, were also silent, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. Goro, our leader, was at the very edge of our perch, his gaze fixed on the leopards. His face, usually a mask of grim determination, was now etched with a profound weariness. He was old, and he knew that our survival depended on his strength, a strength that was beginning to wane. The night stretched on, a long, agonizing eternity of thirst and fear. My throat was dry, my tongue a thick, heavy thing in my mouth. I could hear the other children whimpering softly, their small bodies shaking with the cold and the thirst. The leopards below seemed to be enjoying our torment. One of them, the largest, let out a low, guttural chuff, a sound that was both a warning and a promise. We were trapped. As the night wore on, a new kind of desperation began to settle over us. The children, their small bodies racked with thirst, began to cry in earnest. The sound was a terrible, desperate plea, a plea that seemed to draw the attention of the leopards. One of them, a lean young male, began to climb the rocks, its movements quick and sure. We watched, our hearts pounding as it made its way up, its eyes, two burning coals in the darkness, fixed on us. Goro let out a guttural cry, a sound of defiance and fury. He picked up a stone, a heavy, jagged thing, and threw it at the leopard. The stone hit the rock face with a loud crack, startling the leopard for a moment. But it was only a moment. The leopard, undeterred, continued its climb, its muscles rippling under its spotted coat. My mother, Alara, her mind working frantically, began to look for an escape. She looked at the rocks, at the small, narrow crevices, at the high, overhanging ledges. She saw a path, a narrow, treacherous path that led to a different part of the rocky outcropping, a place where the leopards could not follow. But it was a dangerous path, a path that required a leap of faith, a path that a child could not take alone. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate hope. She pointed with her chin to the path, her hands, which had been so strong, now trembling with a new kind of fear. She spoke in our quiet, clicking tongue, telling me a story of a time when a great flood had come upon the land and our ancestors had to climb to the very tops of the tallest trees to survive. She was not just telling me a story of the past. She was giving me a command, a desperate plea to trust her, to believe in a path that seemed impossible. I nodded, my small body trembling with fear, but also with a new kind of resolve. I had to trust her. I had to believe in her. She was my mother, and her mind was a weapon, a shield, a tool. She was the one who had taught me to read the language of the savannah, to see a path where there was none. With a final desperate push, she lifted me onto her back, my arms and legs wrapped tightly around her. She gave me one last look, a look that was both a promise and a goodbye. And then she moved. She was a silent shadow in the night, a dancer on the edge of a great abyss. We climbed and we climbed, our bodies pulling themselves higher and higher, away from the watchful eyes of the leopards. We moved along the treacherous path, our movements a testament to our desperation, our hope, and then we leaped. We leaped across a chasm, a great black void that seemed to stretch into eternity. For a moment we were suspended in the air, a small, fragile thing, a gasp of pure fear. But we landed. We landed on the other side, on a small, narrow ledge, safe for now, but not free. We were on a different part of the outcropping, a place where the leopards could not follow. We had survived. We had escaped, but we were still trapped. We were still thirsty, and we were still in the middle of a long, dark night, our survival hanging in the balance. The morning came as a slow, agonizing wash of light. The sky, which had been a cold, black canvas, now took on the colors of bruised fruit, deep purples and reds that bled into a pale, lifeless orange. From our new perch, a narrow ledge on the rocky outcropping, we could see the watering hole below. The 3 leopards were gone, their silent, deadly vigil over for the day. But the relief we felt was a hollow thing, for our thirst was now a deep, burning ache, a physical pain that clouded all other thoughts. My mother, Ilara, held me close. Her face, usually so full of life, was now gaunt and pale, her lips cracked and dry. The other mothers, huddled together on the small ledge, were also silent. Their eyes, which had been so full of fear, were now empty, filled only with the desperate longing for water. Goro, our leader, was at the very edge of our perch, his gaze fixed on the plains below. His face, etched with a profound weariness, spoke of a man who had reached the end of his endurance. We had survived the night, but our survival was a temporary thing. The sun, our old enemy, was beginning its slow climb into the sky, and with it, our time was running out. As the sun began to beat down on us, the heat became a physical presence, a weight on our shoulders, a hammer on our heads. The thirst was a constant torment, a whisper in our ears, a fire in our bellies. We could not stay here. We had to move. We had to find water. But the ground was a vast, parched wasteland, a sea of dust and dry, brittle grass. Where would we go? Where could we find the lifeline that would save us? My mother, Ilara, her mind working frantically, began to look for a way. She looked at the rocks, at the small, narrow crevices, at the high, overhanging ledges. She saw a path, a narrow, treacherous path that led down from the outcropping and into a small, rocky gorge. It was a path that only a child could take, a path that was too narrow for a full-grown adult, but it was a path to a new kind of hope. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate hope. She spoke in our quiet, clicking tongue, telling me a story of a time when a small bird had shown our ancestors the way to water, a time when a tiny, fragile creature had saved our clan. She was not just telling me a story of the past. She was giving me a command, a desperate plea to trust her, to believe in a path that seemed impossible. I nodded, my small body trembling with fear, but also with a new kind of resolve. I had to trust her. I had to believe in her. She was my mother, and her mind was a weapon, a shield, a tool. She was the one who had taught me to read the language of the savannah, to see a path where there was none. With a final, desperate push, she lifted me onto the edge of the gorge. She gave me one last look, a look that was both a promise and a goodbye. And then she let me go. I was a silent shadow in the morning light, a small, fragile thing clinging to the side of a great rock. I climbed down the narrow gorge, my hands and feet, which had been so clumsy on the plains, now nimble and strong. I was a child, but I was also a messenger, a scout, a lifeline. My mission was simple, but terrifying. I had to find water. I moved through the gorge, my small body a silent, quick shadow in the darkness. The air was cool and still, a welcome relief from the burning heat of the sun. The gorge was a world of its own, a world of shadows and echoes, a world of twisted rock formations and ancient, silent stones. And then I saw it. A glint of light in the darkness, a small, shimmering pool of water. It was a miracle, a small, beautiful thing in a world of dust and despair. I drank. My throat, which had been so dry, now filled with the cool, sweet water. I drank until my belly was full, my mind clear, my body strong. I had found it. I had found the lifeline that would save us all. I filled a large piece of the wildebeest, hide we had used to carry the meat, a heavy, unwieldy thing, with water, and began my slow, difficult climb back up the gorge. I was a small boy, but I was carrying a great weight, a weight of hope, of survival, of a new kind of life. And as I climbed, I knew that we were no longer just a clan of two-legged creatures. We were something more. We were a clan of thinkers, of problem solvers, of survivors. We were on the edge of evolution, and we were ready to take our next step. The water I carried was a heavy, sloshing burden, but it was a burden of life. My small body strained under the weight, my legs trembling with the effort of climbing the steep, treacherous path. The rock walls of the gorge, which had been so cool and dark, now felt like a cage. The sun's heat beginning to penetrate even here. I had to be careful. Every step was a calculated risk. A single misstep would mean the loss of the water, a loss that would be a death sentence for my family. My mind, which had been so full of fear and thirst, was now a single, focused point of determination. I was no longer just a child. I was a messenger, a lifeline. The knowledge that my mother, my family, was waiting for me, gave me a strength I never knew I had. I climbed, and I climbed, my hands and feet finding purchase on the smallest of crevices, my body pulling itself higher, and higher, toward the light, toward the sun, toward home, and then I saw them, my family. My mother, Ilara, was on the ledge, her face pale with worry, her eyes fixed on the mouth of the gorge. When she saw me, a gasp of relief escaped her lips, and her eyes, which had been so empty, now filled with a new kind of light. She was not just my mother, she was my leader, my teacher, my friend. She had sent me on a mission that was impossible, and I had succeeded. The other mothers, who had been so silent and so weary, now let out a collective sigh of relief. The children, their small bodies trembling with thirst, now looked at me with a new kind of wonder. I was no longer just Tariq, a small boy in a big world. I was Tariq, the one who had found the water. I was Tariq, the one who had saved our family. My mother, her face full of a profound love and gratitude, helped me up the last few feet of the climb. She took the water from me, and with a reverence that was almost religious, she gave the first drink to Goro, our leader. He drank, his eyes closing in a moment of pure, unadulterated relief. He then passed the water to the other mothers, and they in turn passed it to their children. We all drank, a long, slow, sweet drink that was more precious than any fruit, any meat, any treasure. We had survived. We had won. But our victory was a temporary thing. We were still on the outcropping, a small, fragile group in a vast, dangerous world. We had water, but we had no food. We had survived the night, but we had a new day to face. We had to move. We had to find a new home, a new life. And as the sun began its slow, relentless climb into the sky, Goro, his strength now restored, pointed to the east toward the great jagged mountains that rose into the sky. He spoke in our quiet, clicking tongue of a new journey, a new hope. We would not go back to our old home, a land that was now a wasteland. We would not stay in this place, a place of danger and of death. We would go forward, toward the new home, the promised land. We were a small group, a family, a clan, but we were a new kind of people. We had not just survived, we had evolved. We had learned to use our minds, our hands, our tools, to overcome our greatest fears. We were on the edge of a new kind of life, a new kind of future. And as we began our descent, I knew that our journey was just beginning. The journey down from the outcropping was slow and methodical. We were a different group now. The thirst had not just been a torment, it had been a teacher. We had learned that our greatest strength was not in our individual bodies, but in our cooperation. My mother, Alara, was a leader not just in action but in thought. She had us move in a new way, with the smaller children in the middle and the mothers at the front and back, our eyes constantly scanning the horizon. We were a tight-knit unit, a living shield against the world. Our path led us through a rocky, uneven landscape, a land that was a maze of jagged stone and deep ravines. We were not on the open plains anymore. We were in a land of shadows, a land where a misstep could mean a broken bone, or worse. The water I had brought was a memory now, a sweet taste on our tongues. But the hunger had returned, a cold, empty feeling in the pit of our stomachs. We needed food, and we needed to find it soon. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery colors, we came across a sight that made us all stop. It was a cluster of trees, but they were unlike any we had ever seen before. Their trunks were thick and heavy, their branches a tangle of twisted wood, and they were heavy with a fruit that was unlike any we had ever seen. The fruit was large and round, and it hung from the branches in great heavy clusters. A new kind of hunger, one born of curiosity, began to gnaw at us. We approached the trees with caution, our eyes darting around for any sign of a predator. The air around the trees was thick with the scent of the fruit, a sweet, intoxicating smell. My mother, her brow furrowed in thought, picked up a stone. She looked at the fruit, then at the stone. She looked at me, and I knew what she was thinking. The fruit was too hard to bite into. It had to be broken open. She took a stone, and with a few careful blows, she cracked open the fruit. The inside was a rich, pulpy orange, and the smell was even more intoxicating. She took a small piece and tasted it, her eyes widening with a look of pure pleasure. She handed a piece to me, and I tasted it. It was the sweetest thing I had ever had. It was a taste of heaven, a taste of a new kind of life. The other mothers, seeing our faces, began to do the same. They picked up stones, and with a series of tentative blows, they began to crack open the fruit. We ate until we were full, our hands and faces sticky with the juice. We had found a new kind of food, a new kind of sustenance. We had found a way to not just survive, but to thrive. As the sun began its slow descent, we settled in at the base of the fruit trees, our bellies full and our hearts filled with a new kind of hope. The world, which had been so cruel and so unforgiving, had just given us a gift, and we had a new kind of food, a new kind of resource. We had found a way to use our minds to change our world. We were no longer just a small, fragile group of mothers and children. We were a group of thinkers, a group of innovators. We were on the edge of a new kind of existence, and as the darkness fell, I knew that we were not just surviving, we were becoming. The morning light, soft and pale, filtered through the branches of the great trees. We had made our home there, in a small clearing at the base of the fruit trees. The fear that had been our constant companion was now a memory, replaced by a new kind of peace. Our bellies were full, our thirst was quenched, and our hearts were filled with a new kind of hope. We had found a new home, a new life, and we had found it with our minds, not just with our hands. My mother, Alara, was no longer just a mother. She was our leader, our teacher, our guide. She taught us how to make tools, sharp stones that could cut through the thick skin of an animal, heavy stones that could crack open the bones of the biggest creatures. She taught us how to find the sweetest fruit, the most nourishing roots, the clearest water. She had led us through the darkness and into the light. She had taken us to the very edge of our existence and had shown us a new kind of life. I was no longer just Tariq, a small boy in a big world. I was a part of something new. I was a part of this tribe, this family. We had lost so much. We had lost our old home, our old way of life, but we had gained something new. We had gained the tools. We had gained the knowledge of how to use our minds to change our world. We were no longer just a small, fragile group of mothers and children. We were a group of thinkers, a group of innovators. We were on the edge of a new kind of existence, and as the sun rose higher in the sky, I knew that we were not just surviving. We were becoming. The days that followed were a blur of new things. We learned to make simple shelters from the long grasses and the branches of the trees. We learned to make baskets from the long vines that grew in the forest, baskets that could carry more fruit than our arms ever could. We learned to make ropes from the thick bark of the trees, ropes that could pull down a heavy branch or tie, a bundle of wood together. We were a new kind of people, and our hands, which had once been so empty, were now full of tools, full of knowledge, full of a new kind of power. But with the new power came a new kind of fear. We were no longer alone. We had a new home, a new life. But our new home was in the territory of other creatures, creatures that were bigger and stronger than us. We were a small, fragile group, and we had to be careful. We had to be vigilant. The world was still a dangerous place, and we were still just a small, fragile thing in a vast, dangerous world. One day, as we were gathering fruit, we saw it. A great spotted cat, a creature of immense power and grace, was watching us from the shadows of the forest. It was a leopard, its eyes, two burning coals in the darkness, fixed on us. We froze, our hearts pounding, our hands, which had been so full of fruit, now empty of all but fear. The leopard did not move. It just watched us, its body a study in stillness, its eyes a study in hunger. My mother, Elara, her face a mask of grim determination, let out a low, guttural cry. It was not a cry of fear. It was a cry of defiance, a cry of a new kind of courage. She raised a stone, a heavy, jagged thing, and with a series of powerful, practiced blows, she began to chip away at a large branch of a tree, creating a new kind of tool, a new kind of weapon. The sound was a loud, rhythmic drumming, a sound that was both a challenge and a promise. The leopard, startled by the sound, turned and disappeared into the shadows. We had survived. We had won. We had not just found a new home. We had found a new way to defend it. We were on the edge of evolution, and we were ready to take our next step. The moon was a perfect, luminous circle, hanging high in the velvet blackness of the sky. We were no longer just survivors. We were a tribe, gathered around a small, crackling fire. The fire was a gift from my mother, Elara. Not a gift of magic, but a gift of her mind. In her efforts to make a better tool, she had taken 2 stones, one sharp and one dull, and had been hammering at them to create a new kind of blade. In her effort, a small spark had flown from the impact, landing on a pile of dry grass. The fire had been born of a simple accident, but we had learned its power. The fire was a living, breathing thing. It was our protector, a shield against the darkness. It kept the great cats away, their golden eyes reflecting the flickering light from a safe distance. It was our cook, a thing that turned the raw meat of the wild pig we had found into a soft, savory meal. It was our home, the center of our new world. We had made it. We had reached the great river. It was a sight of unimaginable beauty, a vast expanse of water that stretched to the horizon. Its banks were lined with trees, great, towering things, heavy with fruit. There was an abundance of food, of water, of life. We were no longer a small, terrified group of mothers and children. We were a tribe, a family. We had a home, but we were not the same. We had changed. The children were no longer just children. They were explorers, their small hands and feet learning to climb the great trees, their eyes learning to read the language of the river. Lena, my friend, was no longer just a hunter of insects. She was a fisher, her small hands learning to weave a net from the long grasses. The other mothers, who had once been so dependent on the big males, were now leaders in their own right. They were thinkers. They were builders. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving. And my mother, Alara, was no longer just a mother. She was our leader, our teacher, our innovator. She taught us how to make tools, sharp stones that could cut through the thick skin of an animal, heavy stones that could crack, open the bones of the biggest creatures. She taught us how to use the fire, how to feed it, how to keep it alive. She had led us through the darkness and into the light. She had taken us to the very edge of our existence and had shown us a new kind of life. I was no longer just Tariq, a small boy in a big world. I was a part of something new. I was a part of this tribe, this family. We had lost so much. We had lost our old home, our old way of life. But we had gained something new. We had gained the fire. We had gained the tools. We had gained the knowledge of how to use our minds to change our world. We were no longer just a creature, a small, fragile being in a vast, dangerous world. We were something more. We were human. We were at the very beginning of a long, long story, a story that would be told not just in our clicks and our gestures, but in the tools we made, in the fires we kept, in the homes we built. The savannah was still a dangerous place. The great cats were still hungry, but we were no longer afraid. We had a new kind of strength, a new kind of power. We were on the edge of evolution, and we had just taken our first incredible step. The story of our people, the story of humanity, had just begun.